The following presentation was made possible by the Alltech Media Group, a Southern California multimedia company providing exponential branding and marketing services to all their clients. The Alltech Media Group understands the value of the 3W strategy, providing their clients proven, trackable results. Let us make it easy for you to grow your business. Visit alltechmedia.com.
Our keynote speaker leads more than 2,000 sailors, civilians, and support contractors in NORCO around the country as commanding officer of Naval Surface Warfare Center, Corona Division. I'll abbreviate that to Corona. No, that's not good. This is Riverside. I'll come up with something. He assumed command last summer of the Navy's premier independent assessment agency that's responsible for gauging the warfighting capability of U.S. Navy ships and aircraft. NSWC Corona also serves as the metrology and calibration agent for the Navy and Marine Corps and as the range systems engineering agent for the Navy and Marine Corps' team fleet and air training ranges. Our principal speaker enlisted in the Navy in 1986 and first served aboard the submarine USS Lafayette. He spent 14 years at sea, plus shore assignments that included duty in Afghanistan as part of the Operation Enduring Freedom. Before coming to the Warfare Center, he was Deputy Major Programs Manager for the ship's self-defense system at the Washington Navy Yard, Washington, D.C. Among his personal decorations are the Meritorious Service Medal 4 times, the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal 5 times, and the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal 4 times. Please welcome the Commanding Officer of the Naval Surface Warfare Center, Corona Division, Captain Stephen Murphy.
Good morning, Riverside. It is great to be here. Appreciate you all having me. I'm going to give you a little update on what we're doing, but first, as Mayor Bailey mentioned, tomorrow is 9/11. So I want to talk a little about kind of what the Navy's life was like walking to 9/11. The ship you see there is USS Cole. When 9/11 hit us, Navy was already reeling from about 11 months prior, having a number of Al-Qaeda terrorists in the port of Aden in the country of Yemen drive a small boat laden with explosives alongside the ship and blew a over 25-foot diameter hole in the side of that ship. The sailors on board that ship, 17 died, over 70 were injured, and the sailors on board in 3 days trying to keep that ship afloat. Our destroyers are made to survive those kind of hits, but in this case, there's a little bit of problem with bulkhead seals where the shaft runs through and water was spilling over where it shouldn't have, and these sailors in 100-degree heat fought to keep that ship afloat. The Blue Marlin there picked her up about a month later, took her back. She's back in service and back fighting the good fight. But as 9/11 hit, the folks in Bahrain, where the Fifth Fleet is located, we're still recovering from that. That event caused all the families, the sailors going to the Middle East, not to take their families. And when 9/11 hit, that command out there was the one that was helping to support all the operations going on in Afghanistan. At the time in the region, the only flag officer across the Department of Defense stationed in the region was Admiral Moore, 3-star Vice Admiral in the Navy. His deputy was in Tampa. His boss was in Tampa. The Army was in Georgia, the Air Force in Charleston, the Marines in Honolulu. Since then, we've moved out there, and you'll notice there are flag officers in all those areas. But that one 3-star was driving everything. He was my boss at the time, and one of the things he joked about was you had 14 stars from the Navy in 6th Fleet and 3 ships. You had a single 3-star in Bahrain with over 100 ships. Driving, the Navy was the one taking all that fight into supporting the Special Forces in Afghanistan. Had the opportunity recently to go on board USS Michael Murphy. The Michael Murphy is named for a SEAL who at the young age of 29 was killed in Afghanistan. USS Michael Murphy recently commissioned DDG-112. It's our newest destroyer out in the fleet today. As I walked around that ship On the mess decks of that ship is a display from Engine Company 53 from New York City. Michael Murphy was born on Long Island, grew up in New York, and when he wanted to motivate his sailors as SEALs if they needed motivation, the motivation he drew on were the firefighters from Engine Company 53 in New York City. And those folks are the ones who ran into the World Trade Center to try to help and save all the folks that were subject to that attack. So this SEAL, this warrior, he relied on the other first responders as a motivation for his sailors, just an inspiration. And if you get a chance just to walk around a ship and see that they've actually made that right on the center of the mess deck, so that all the sailors on that ship can see that it's not just military, it's all the first responders. It's the police, it's the fire, and it's the folks out there around the world serving as your military. So just as a remembrance as you head to 9/11, think about those folks out there. Please say a prayer for them. And if you see them, I see folks in the airport all the time in uniform, those young kids coming back. Thank them for their service, because what they do is truly amazing. So one last night I had one of my employees, one of the things we do at Corona, we're supporting the fleet in a lot of ways, but it's mostly government civilians who come in and go out. And recently we had a push on hiring. I've hired a bunch of new kids out of school here, and I asked them when they walk in, have you ever seen a Navy ship before? And many of them say no, never seen one. So one of the things we have is a Science to Sea program. So we send folks out and they go to spend 2 to 3 days underway on a destroyer, on an aircraft carrier, on whatever ship we can find that'll take them. And I had lunch with this guy about a month ago. He went out a couple weeks ago on the USS Spruance, DDG 111. And he came back to tell me about his experience. And what he said was, I had no idea how hard those guys work. They, if you think about it, a ship is like a little city. So 24 hours a day, there's somebody who's manning those stations, keeping the power going, keeping the engines going, keeping the combat system running. The crews are built to stand a 3-section watch, which means 8 hours a day, those sailors are standing watch. Outside of that time, they've got to do training, they've got to do maintenance, they've got to eat. We try to be a fit force. They're actually required to go work out as well. So imagine 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, you're standing watch. And then outside of that, you're doing maintenance on your systems. You're working out, you're training. Those sailors out there on those ships are working easily 16 hours a day and then sleeping a little bit in between. It is what he came back and said, I had no idea how hard those guys work. So again, please thank those folks. Next slide. And I apologize. You might notice a little bit passionate about this kind of stuff. All right, so what are we doing? So at Corona, our job is to ensure that our warfighters can train, fight, and win through measurement, analysis, and independent assessment. Trying to get to what that means. So I've got a son who's about to be promoted to Chief Petty Officer in the Navy. When I talk to him, he understands, he gets it, he's lived it. My dad was Army. But when we talk about Navy life, my wife grew up Army, and I've taken other relatives who were Army onto a ship, and the comment they made to me was, well, at the end of the day, you just lock the door and go home, right? Well, no, it's 24/7. Trying to get that message, I've been learning, trying to teach my father, and what he'll say to me is, when I give him a little rundown of what's going on, okay, now give me the glossary of acronyms. What do all these things mean? So as I talk to you all, I'm trying to help you understand what life is like on a Navy ship and how important it is what we do. But we are, point of this slide, when I first showed you this slide about a year ago, it was 1,042 for the government civilians. It's more than 10% growth in the past year, and we're looking to grow more. And the reason we're doing that is not because we're trying to build an empire, not because we're trying to grow. It's because the Navy needs what we do. As the defense budget is on a downward slide because of the fiscal constraints within our country, it is important that we make the right decisions with our money, put the right dollar in the right place to do the right thing for the system. So what we do is we provide those metrics. We provide those tools to the fleet and to the programmers, the budgeteers in DC, to make the right decisions with the money. So as the Defense Department budget decreases, there is more need for our services, and that's why we are growing. Next slide. Again, just to focus, I recently had a visit from the Inspector General. You never like when those guys come on board. They're all about compliance. They joke they have no personality. They just walk in and they say, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. But one of the questions they asked me was, what makes NSWC Corona unique? Well, what makes us unique is that my partner warfare centers are all focused on something. They're focused on the combat system development. They're focused on the test of it. They're focused on expeditionary. We're focused everywhere. You will find Corona touching every single warfighting platform in the Navy and Marine Corps team in some way. Whether it's assessment, whether it's measurement science, we're there. The upper left, it's my boss is NAVC, but that's only a third of my work. And the Navy's built in 4 systems commands: air, sea, SPAWAR, which is the computer systems and intelligence systems, and then strategic systems program, which is the ballistic missile submarines. So 4 systems commands, 6 type commanders. You've got a surface, a submarine, and an air on each fleet, each coast. Well, those 10 organizations are all folks that Corona supports. So we're everywhere. We really are across the fleet. And as I pointed out in the last brief I gave to the Military Affairs Committee, we're also around the world. That day I had people in Turkey, Spain, Egypt, Thailand, Japan, and one other. I've lost it now. Not important. But we're around there supporting foreign military sales for other navies as well. So they buy our stuff, we go out and we help them. Next slide. Up here, notice the plus 118. We're increasing our size, not just locally, but around the country. But most of that growth is here. Most of that growth is on the base. We're plussing up to almost 1,500 on base. When I talked to you last year, we were just over 1,300. So we're really starting to grow as far as people on board. But we are also around the country. And we're going to have a dot up in the Seattle, Washington areas. We built a range for the Growlers. Example of what we do, that range we're building, it's a tactical training range for the Growlers, which are the electronic attack aircraft. They go out there to, one, defeat IEDs on the ground, but also to defeat the integrated air defense systems of other countries. For the past few years, those planes have had to leave Seattle, Whidbey Island, and fly all the way into Idaho to do their training. It's a lot of hours on those aircraft. It shortens their life. We built a range there. We spent a little less than $5 million building it. And what that's going to do is going to increase the life of those planes, and the savings in fuel alone pay for that range within 18 months. So it's one of the greatest investments. But we're out there. They get quicker training, better training at lower cost. That's what we're about. Next slide. Again, I've shown this slide before, but just to highlight the 2 points in the upper left. The money we bring in has increased. Last year was $211 million in what we call reimbursable. That's the money that goes to pay our salaries. This year to 286. That's a huge increase. That just highlights the demand for what we do. And again, increasing our local size by about 200 folks. Next slide. Spend a little more time on this slide. Vice Admiral Roden is the commander of Naval Surface Force. He's in charge of all the surface ships, cruisers, destroyers, littoral combat ships, patrol coastals, both fleets. And at the Surface Navy Association West Symposium 2 months ago, he highlighted 2 things that were his focus areas. One was improving surface ship availability planning. When you take a surface ship into a shipyard, imagine trying to take the city of Riverside and take it apart. Fix all of the infrastructure, the water lines, the power lines, food service, your living arrangements, and then in the course of about 6 weeks, put it all back together and make it work when it comes out. It is an incredibly complex process that our sailors have to go through. And having done that on every ship I've been stationed, it is a very difficult process. And what ends up happening is the sailors go, just like I talked about that time on deployment where you're standing on this watch, you roll into where you're working 6 or 7 days a week in 12, 14-hour days, trying to get that ship put back together so you can get out. It is an arduous process, and the Navy has had some missteps along the way in how we plan. So we're trying to work, we, Corona, are working the metrics to improve that process, to make sure the right decisions are made at the right point at the right time, and to make sure those ships get out on time. The impact when those ships don't get out on time is that ship that's out there on deployment, it's been out there for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, stays. Or that ship that's coming out of the yards goes into a reduced training cycle, and they go out on deployment less ready than they should be. And when they get out there less ready, there's a spiral to that as well. Because if they're not trained, they're not operating the systems right, they break more maintenance. We need to get ahead of that. Something called the Optimized Fleet Response Plan is in works, and we're a part of making that right. Because we need to get those ships out there, but we need to get them back. Again, I'll mention my son. My son went on deployment on the USS Barry to the Eastern Med about 2 years ago. And he was supposed to be home in August. He got home in November. It is arduous trying to support his wife in that, because she's expecting her husband home. He doesn't come home. Now she's got to deal with 3 extra months, not planned. How do you deal with supporting the house, supporting kids, et cetera? The second thing he talked about, the fourth bullet down the side, is Top Gun for the surface fleet. I love the music today being Danger Zone. A little Top Gun stuff going on, that's good. For 40 years, Corona has provided the engineering behind Top Gun. That's about going out and providing those aviators, when they go fly, with a replay capability so that every ounce that of fuel we burn on a tactical training range, the pilot gets trained, gets feedback, and can improve from that training. The Surface Force has never done that. Why? Because, as I described today, we're too busy. Well, that's the wrong focus, and we're starting to get a change in mindset in all the senior leadership of the Navy. We recognize that, hey, that aviation model worked. Why aren't we doing that on the surface side? Well, Corona's been the engineering arm behind that aviation model for 40 years. So now Corona's falling in to be behind the engineering behind the Surface Force as they adopt that same concept. So that's the second thing Admiral Roden mentioned in his speech. And the thing I've tied to my workforce is the 3-star boss for all the Surface Force has highlighted 2 initiatives that are his 2 main priorities, and the organizations behind both of those is NSWC Corona. Recently did just a look at our Navy in 2025. I'm going to be looking at what's the workforce of Corona going to be 10 years from now? What do we expect our workload to be? If you look at the Navy of 2025, the same ships that we have today are all going to still be in service. We've got over 60 DDG-51 class, they're still going to be here. We've got 22 CG-47 class, they're still going to be here. We've got 10 CVN-68 class, will be minus 1 of those in 10 years as we bring on CVN-78. LSD-41, LPD-17, LHA-6, and LHD-1, all the amphibious ships are all going to be here. But we're also going to have CVN-78, the new Ford-class carrier, that comes out next year. We're also going to have DDG-1000, comes out next year. We've got littoral combat ship going through operational tests, and we're going to have the new frigates. So we're going to have all the same ships plus 4 new. The weapon systems that are out there, Standard Missiles 236, the Evolved Sea Spiral Missile, Rolling Airframe Missile, Griffin Missile, all those missiles are still going to be there. But you're going to have an upgraded Block 2 missile for ESSM. You're going to have improvements in the Standard Missile series. And that means for us, since we evaluate all those weapon systems, you're just going to increase the workload. There's more stuff. We still got to track that stuff that's out there. So the existing platforms are all still going to be there. But we're going to be evolving. We're going to be talking, directed energy weapons are going through testing. We've got a laser on the former USS Ponce out in the Middle East, the first directed energy weapon on a ship at sea. We're building those kind of systems. They've got to be evaluated. Our job is to assess the warfighting capability. You're going to build new weapon systems, electromagnetic railgun, for example, that's going to use electricity to fire a projectile instead of using powder. Safer, and can also achieve higher velocities. A more accurate round that goes farther. So lots of new technologies coming out there. As we go through some initiatives we have going on, talked about we're the metrology and calibration agent. Most folks don't even understand what that means. The way I describe that, you got your speedometer, you get a speeding ticket, you go and you take it to the place, you say, calibrate this so I can go fight my ticket. We do that, not fight the ticket, but we do that kind of calibration for the whole Navy. Every system on board a ship has got to be measured. Use a reduction gear as an example. You got high-speed engines on a surface ship that goes to reduction gear to spin that shaft at a slower rate because you don't want a shaft spinning 5,000 RPM, but the engine's got to spin that fast because it's a jet engine. That one gear alone has got over 100 measurement devices on it. When you talk about the inventory we manage, 1.8 million pieces of test equipment across the Navy that we manage. But I mentioned 4 systems commands, 6 type commanders. Those 10 organizations all do their own thing. We're trying to work that into one program, not 10 programs. I mentioned availability planning. I mentioned Top Gun. Again, two great initiatives moving forward. Next. So again, there's increased demand for what we do. As we bring new systems online, we're needed more for operational tests, for assessing. And as we shift to the pivot to the Pacific, 60% of the Navy surface force is coming to San Diego. We need to make sure that we're there to support that, and they're looking to us to help support the maintenance process for all those ships. We do have an economic impact. The work that we do, more people are coming here for meetings to use the facilities we have, especially for assessment. And the 183 number is now up to 189. That's our target. Looks like we're gonna make that, and looking like the same kind of hiring next year on the order of about 200 folks again next year. So that's again drawing folks out of local colleges. We are big into small business. 2/3 of our contracts last year are not quite that big this year, but looking to a large amount of small business. We're federal lab for about 5 years now and starting to get recognized for our efforts there. Highlight here, we had another patent issue just 2 weeks ago, a month ago now, 2 weeks ago, last time I talked to the slide. One other note, the first Navy birthday commemoration, my lawyers say I can't say birthday ball, so per my lawyer's guidance, I won't say birthday ball. I didn't say birthday ball. It's Navy's 240th birthday, Riverside Convention Center. A great opportunity to come out and a little bit of study about learn a little about the history of the Navy, and celebrate our military. And with that, we've talked about all this too. So thank you all for listening. Thank a sailor, thank a policeman, thank a firefighter today, tomorrow, and every day. And I'll try to make breakfast tomorrow. Thank you.